The room fell silent as the images of Earth appeared on the large screen. 12 different alien species sat around the circular table, their eyes fixed on the blue and green planet that rotated slowly before them. Ambassador Zorlath of the HFY Veldari stood up, his slender frame casting a long shadow across the table. "This," he said, pointing a thin finger at the image, "is what our scouts have classified as a death world." The aliens murmured among themselves. Death worlds were rare in the galaxy, planets so harsh and filled with dangers that intelligent life should never have evolved there. Yet somehow, this one had produced a species that was now sending radio signals into space. "The readings are clear," continued Zorlath. "High gravity, extreme weather patterns, dangerous levels of oxygen that encourage combustion, and most concerning of all," he paused for effect, apex predators. Hundreds of species of them, spread across every continent. Senior Council Member Jiv leaned forward, her translucent skin reflecting the blue light of Earth. "And yet they developed technology? How is this possible?" "That is what we must discover," said Zorlath. "The Council has authorized a first contact mission. I will lead it." 3 weeks later, the Veldari ship approached Earth orbit. The crew watched nervously as they neared the blue planet. None of them had ever set foot on a death world before. Their own homeworlds were peaceful places where evolution had favored cooperation rather than predation. "We are receiving a transmission," announced the communications officer. "They're directing us to approach something called the International Space Station." The human structure came into view, a spindly collection of modules that seemed impossibly fragile to the aliens. As they docked with the station, Zorlath prepared his team for the first meeting with humans. "Remember," he told them, "these creatures evolved alongside constant danger. We must be cautious." The airlock opened and Ambassador Zorlath led his team of 5 into the station. They were met by a group of humans in blue uniforms. At the front stood a woman with short brown hair and a man with broad shoulders and a serious expression. "Welcome to Earth's International Space Station," said the woman, smiling. "I'm Dr. Lisa Morgan, lead scientist for this mission. This is Captain Peter Wright of the United Space Command." Zorlath performed the traditional Veldari greeting, pressing his 3-fingered hands together. "I am Ambassador Zorlath of the Galactic Council. We come in peace and friendship." The humans led them into a larger module where they could sit and talk. The aliens moved cautiously in the unfamiliar gravity. "We've been hoping for this day for centuries," said Dr. Morgan. "To know we're not alone in the universe is incredible." "We detected your radio signals," explained Zorlath. "Your species has advanced quickly. This is unusual for a planet of your classification." Captain Wright raised an eyebrow. "Classification?" Zorlath hesitated before answering. "In our surveys, Earth is what we call a death world, a planet with environmental conditions and predatory species that normally prevent the evolution of intelligent life." The humans exchanged glances, and to the aliens' surprise, they smiled. "Guess Earth is pretty rough compared to some places," said Dr. Morgan, "but it's home to us." The conversation continued as they shared basic information about their respective species. The aliens learned about human history, and with each new piece of information, their amazement grew. "You coexisted with large predators during your evolution?" asked Tulnok, the xenobiologist of the alien team. "Creatures that hunted you?" "Of course," replied Captain Wright. "Bears, wolves, big cats. Early humans had to be smart to survive." "And how did you survive?" asked Zorlath, genuinely puzzled. Dr. Morgan pulled up images on a tablet. "We made tools, worked together. At first we scavenged and hid. Later we became hunters ourselves." She showed them cave paintings of primitive humans hunting mammoths, creatures many times their size. The aliens stared in disbelief. "You hunted creatures larger than yourselves? With pointed sticks?" Zorlath could barely form the words. Captain Wright nodded. "Teamwork and strategy. We'd track them for days sometimes, wear them down. It's called persistence hunting." The alien delegation grew visibly uncomfortable. In their cultures, the concept of deliberately pursuing a dangerous creature was unthinkable. "And now?" asked Zivra, another member of the alien team. These predators still exist? Some do, though many are endangered now, explained Dr. Morgan. We've changed Earth a lot. Some species we pushed out, others we domesticated. Domesticated? The word seemed unfamiliar to the aliens. Dr. Morgan showed them pictures of dogs, descendants of wolves that now lived as human companions. The aliens were stunned into silence. You took a predator species and made them your allies? Zorloth's voice was barely a whisper. Dogs have been with us for thousands of years, said Captain Wright with a shrug. They help us hunt, protect our homes. Some are just companions now. My family has 2 golden retrievers. The meeting continued for hours. The humans shared their history, speaking casually about surviving ice ages, plagues, and wars. They described how they had spread across their planet, adapting to deserts, Arctic regions, and dense jungles. As the initial meeting drew to a close, Zorloth made a formal request. The Council would like to send researchers to Earth to learn more about human development. This could greatly benefit both our peoples. We'd be happy to host your researchers, said Dr. Morgan. We have just as many questions about you as you have about us. Later, back on their ship, the alien delegation gathered to discuss their observations. They speak of facing apex predators as if it were a minor inconvenience, said Zivra, still processing what they had learned. And they show no fear of being in space, added Tolnak, an environment that should terrify any rational species. Zorloth looked thoughtfully at the blue planet below them. We have much to learn about these humans. They evolved in an environment that should have killed them, yet here they are, reaching for the stars. Should we be concerned? Asked one of the junior diplomats. Zorloth considered the question carefully. I don't believe they mean us harm, but we should remember that these are creatures who faced down predators with nothing but sharpened sticks and determination. They are unlike any species we have encountered before. As the ship moved into Earth's shadow, Zorloth made his decision. We will proceed with the research mission. The Council must understand these Deathworlders if we are to welcome them into the galactic community. Little did the aliens know that their fascination with humans was just beginning. The true extent of human resilience and ingenuity would soon leave them more stunned than they could possibly imagine. Dr. Alan Garcia stood at the entrance of the Museum of Natural History, watching as the alien research team approached. It had been 2 weeks since the initial contact, and the Galactic Council had wasted no time sending their best xenobiologists and anthropologists to study human history. Leading the group was Zivra, a tall, slender being with pale blue skin and large, sensitive eyes that blinked rapidly in the bright morning sunlight. Her team of 6 followed closely behind, their movements cautious and deliberate. Welcome to New York, Alan said with a warm smile. I hope your journey was comfortable. Zivra performed a slight bow. Thank you, Dr. Garcia. The trip was educational. Your planet's gravity is stronger than we are accustomed to, but our exo-support suits are managing the difference. Alan noticed the thin mesh suits they wore beneath their formal robes. He had been briefed that most council species evolved on worlds with lower gravity and fewer environmental hazards than Earth. Well, I'm excited to show you our history, he said, gesturing toward the museum entrance. We'll start with our earliest ancestors and work our way forward. The aliens followed him into the grand hall, their eyes widening at the massive dinosaur skeleton that dominated the space. This creature, asked Tulvan, a stockier alien with ridge-like features. Was it one of your predators? Alan laughed. No, thankfully. Dinosaurs died out about 65 million years before humans evolved, but they're distant relatives of some predators we did face, like crocodiles. The aliens exchanged glances, clearly relieved. Alan led them to the Human Evolution exhibit, where a timeline showed humanity's development from early primates to modern humans. The aliens moved slowly along the display, studying each model with intense concentration. These early hominids, Zivra asked, pointing to a model of Australopithecus. They had no natural weapons? No claws or significant teeth? No, Alan confirmed. Just their brains, their hands, and eventually tools. He guided them to the next exhibit, which displayed primitive stone tools. These were among our first technologies, simple stone hammers and sharp flakes for cutting. The aliens bent close to examine the tools behind the glass. Their expressions were difficult to read, but Alan sensed their disbelief. "You challenged apex predators with these?" Tulvan asked, his voice low. "At first, we mostly used them for scavenging," Alan explained, breaking open bones for marrow after other predators finished their meals. But yes, eventually humans became hunters themselves. They moved to an exhibit showing a recreation of early humans using spears to hunt a mammoth. The scene showed a group of 6 humans working together to bring down the massive creature. "Your ancestors pursued creatures many times their own mass?" asked another researcher named Veltuk. "How did they avoid being trampled?" "Teamwork, mainly," Alan said, "and understanding animal behavior. Plus, humans had an advantage many predators didn't: endurance." He led them to a display about persistence hunting. "Early humans couldn't outrun most animals in a sprint, but we could outlast almost any creature in long-distance running. We would chase prey until they collapsed from exhaustion." The aliens went very still. Their breathing became shallow. Zivra's voice was barely audible when she spoke. "You pursued creatures faster than yourselves until they collapsed from fatigue?" "Yes," Alan nodded. "That's terrifying." Alan tried to hide his surprise at their reaction. "It was just survival. Every species uses its advantages, right? Ours happened to be stamina, tool use, and social cooperation." The group moved through exhibits showing the development of more advanced hunting weapons: atlatls, bows and arrows, traps. With each new innovation, the aliens grew more visibly disturbed. "These developments spanned thousands of years," Tulvan noted. "Your species was remarkably persistent in improving its predatory capabilities." "We had to be," Alan replied, "especially as we spread to new environments with different challenges." The next gallery focused on the domestication of animals. Alan stopped in front of a display showing the evolution of wolves into dogs. "This is perhaps one of humanity's most important partnerships," he explained. "About 15,000 years ago, humans began domesticating wolves." Zivra's translator device seemed to struggle. "Domesticating? This concept is difficult to translate." "It means we selectively bred them to live alongside us," Alan explained. "Over many generations, they became different from wild wolves, more cooperative with humans, less aggressive." "You modified a predator species to serve you?" asked one of the junior researchers, mandibles clicking rapidly. "I wouldn't say serve exactly," Alan corrected gently. "It was a mutually beneficial relationship. Dogs helped us hunt, guarded our camps, and warned us of dangers. We provided them with food and protection." He showed them to the next display, which contained video footage of modern working dogs: border collies herding sheep, retrievers bringing back ducks for hunters, and search and rescue dogs finding people in rubble. "You turned your predators into companions," Zivra whispered, making notes furiously on her datapad. "No other species in the Council has done this." "Really?" Alan found this surprising. "Not even with smaller animals?" "Our evolutionary paths were different," Zivra explained. "Most Council species evolved in environments where predators were rare or easily avoided. We never had to confront them as you did." As they continued through the museum, Alan showed them how humans had not only survived their world's dangers but had gradually mastered them. Agriculture, animal husbandry, cities, and technology. Each step showed humanity's growing control over their environment. By the time they reached the modern era exhibits, the alien researchers were overwhelmed with information. They requested a break to process what they had learned. Alan led them to the museum cafe, where they sat with their special nutrient drinks while he enjoyed a coffee. "Dr. Garcia," Zivra said after a period of silence, "your species' history is unlike anything in our records. You did not merely survive your predators, you systematically outsmarted them, then either eliminated them as threats or turned them into allies." Alan considered this. "I never thought of it that way. It was just human history." "That is what makes it remarkable," said Tulvan. What was survival necessity for you would be considered impossible on most council worlds. As they prepared to continue the tour, Zevra made one final observation. Perhaps this explains why humans show so little fear of the unknown. When your ancestors already faced death daily on their home planet, what else could the universe throw at you that would be worse? Alan smiled. That's an interesting perspective. I suppose humans have always been good at facing challenges head-on. The alien researchers exchanged meaningful glances. The Deathworlders were even more fascinating and concerning than they had initially believed, and they had only just begun to understand them. The Montana sky stretched endlessly blue above Susan Miller's ranch. A month had passed since the alien delegation first arrived on Earth, and now the cultural exchange was moving beyond formal meetings into more personal interactions. Ambassador Zorlath had requested to see how humans lived in their natural environments, not just in cities and research facilities. Susan watched from her porch as 3 vehicles approached along the dirt road. Her husband Frank stood beside, her wiping his hands on a rag after finishing the morning chores. "Do you think they'll like the barbecue?" Susan asked, a hint of nervousness in her voice. Frank chuckled. "They eat plants and synthesized proteins, honey. I doubt they'll want any of my ribs, but they said they were interested in our customs, not our menu." The vehicle stopped in front of the house and several humans stepped out first. Government officials and translators who had been working with the aliens. Then the alien delegation emerged, moving carefully in their support suits that helped them adjust to Earth's gravity and atmosphere. Ambassador Zorlath led the group, followed by Zivra and 5 other aliens representing different council species. They approached the house with careful steps, their eyes darting around the open landscape. "Welcome to our ranch," Susan called out, walking down the porch steps to greet them. "I'm Susan Miller, and this is my husband Frank." Zorlath performed the now familiar greeting gesture. "Thank you for hosting us. Your government officials suggested that to understand humans, we must see how you live close to your natural environment." "Well, this is about as natural as it gets around here," Frank said, gesturing to the open fields and distant mountains. "Our family has worked this land for 4 generations." The aliens seemed hesitant to move away from the vehicles. Susan noticed their discomfort. "Is everything okay?" she asked. Zivra spoke up. "We are unaccustomed to such open spaces. On our homeworlds, open areas often meant vulnerability to predators or harsh elements." Susan nodded with understanding. "Would you feel more comfortable if we went inside first? We can ease into the outdoor activities." The aliens visibly relaxed at this suggestion, and the group moved into the spacious ranch house. Inside, Susan had prepared a welcoming area with comfortable seating and information about ranch life. The aliens settled in, their postures gradually becoming less rigid as they adjusted to the new environment. "Your dwelling is very large," observed Keltor, a junior diplomat with greenish scales and large, sensitive ears. "Do many humans live here?" "Just Frank and me," Susan replied. "And our children when they're home from college. Kyle and Emma should be back from their fishing trip soon." "Fishing?" asked another alien named Jor-El. "You hunt aquatic creatures?" Frank nodded. "For sport mostly, though we do eat what we catch. Humans have been fishing for thousands of years. You willingly enter bodies of water?" Jor-El seemed shocked. "Places where you cannot breathe and could be attacked by aquatic predators?" Susan and Frank exchanged amused glances. "Well, there aren't many dangerous predators in our local streams," Susan explained. "Just trout, which are small fish that humans eat." After an hour of conversation inside, Frank suggested moving to the outdoor area where he had set up for the barbecue. The aliens followed hesitantly, staying close together as they moved into the yard. The government officials had briefed Susan and Frank about the aliens' concerns, so they had planned activities that would gradually introduce their guests to human outdoor life. They started with a simple tour of the garden, which the aliens found reasonably comfortable since it was enclosed by a fence. As Frank began preparing the grill, a sound in the distance caught everyone's attention. Hoofbeats grew louder, and around the corner of the barn came Kyle and Emma on horseback. They slowed their horses to a walk when they spotted the gathering. The reaction from the alien delegation was immediate and intense. Several stumbled backward, and one small being with delicate features let out a high-pitched sound that their translators didn't convert. "What are those creatures?" demanded Zorlath, his voice tight with alarm. "And why are your young riding on them?" Susan raised her hands in a calming gesture. "Those are horses. They're domesticated animals that humans have been riding for thousands of years. They're completely safe." Kyle and Emma dismounted and led their horses to the stable, aware that their arrival had caused a stir. When they returned, Keltor approached them cautiously. "You mounted a creature larger than yourself and bend it to your will?" Emma laughed. "It's not really bending them to our will. Horses are partners. We care for them, and they carry us." Frank explained how humans had domesticated horses from wild ancestors, breeding them for temperament and strength while providing them with food, shelter, and protection from predators. "It's like the dogs we learned about," Zivra said to her colleagues. "Another example of humans turning potentially dangerous creatures into allies." As the afternoon progressed, the aliens gradually became more comfortable in the outdoor setting. They watched with fascination as Frank demonstrated how to grill meat, and they sampled the plant-based sides that Susan had prepared with their dietary needs in mind. The tension returned when Kyle and Emma returned from the stable carrying their fishing gear in a cooler. "We caught 8 rainbow trout," Kyle announced proudly, opening the cooler to reveal the fish. The aliens gathered around, peering at the fish with a mixture of curiosity and discomfort. "You pursued these creatures in their own environment?" asked Jor-El. "In the water, where humans cannot breathe. We use fishing poles," Emma explained, showing her rod and reel. "We stay on the shore or in a boat and catch them with these tools." "Tool use again," murmured Zivra, making notes on her datapad. "Always adapting to environments that should be hostile to them." As evening approached, Frank built a campfire in the fire pit, and the group gathered around it. The dancing flames cast long shadows across the yard, and the aliens watched the fire with a combination of wariness and fascination. Dr. John Harrison, an anthropologist who had accompanied the alien delegation, saw an opportunity for cultural exchange. "In human history, the campfire was a place of safety," he explained. "It kept predators away during the night and became a center for storytelling and community." "Tell them a story, John," suggested Susan. "Something from human folklore." John smiled and began telling ghost stories and tales of human survival against the elements. The aliens listened in horrified fascination as he described how humans not only survived their world's dangers, but incorporated them into their mythology and entertainment. "Your species finds fear recreational?" asked Ambassador Zorlath, incredulously when John finished a particularly tense story about early pioneers surviving a winter storm. "Sometimes," John replied with a smile. "Fear can be thrilling when you know you're ultimately safe." As the stars appeared in the clear Montana sky, the aliens seemed to have gained a new perspective on humanity. These Deathworlders didn't just endure their harsh planet, they embraced it, celebrated it, and made it truly their home. The Great Hall of the Galactic Council glowed with soft blue light as representatives from 200 different species took their seats. 6 months had passed since first contact with Earth, and today was the day the research team would present their findings. The curved walls of the chamber were lined with environmental pods for species that needed special atmospheres or gravity conditions. Ambassador Zorlath stood at the center platform, his slender form now familiar with Earth's gravity after months of adaptation. Behind him stood Zivra and the other researchers who had spent half an Earth year studying humans. "Esteemed council members," Zorlath began, his voice carried by the translation system to every being present. "Today we present our findings on the species known as humans, the inhabitants of the death world called Earth." A murmur ran through the assembly. Most council species had evolved on worlds with mild conditions and few predators. The concept of a death world was disturbing to many. "Humans," continued Zorlath, "are unlike any species we have encountered. They did not merely survive their predators. They systematically outcompeted, domesticated, or eliminated them through a combination of social cooperation, tool use, and psychological resilience. The large screen behind him displayed images of early human hunters working together to bring down a mammoth, wolves being domesticated into dogs, and modern cities replacing wild landscapes. Zivra stepped forward. The most surprising aspect of human biology is their endocrine system. She displayed a diagram of human brain chemistry. It actually rewards risk-taking behavior with pleasurable neurochemicals. They evolved to become addicted to overcoming threats. Council members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The concept was alien to beings whose evolution had favored caution and risk avoidance. Human history is a continuous story of turning disadvantages into strengths, Zorloth explained. When faced with predators faster than themselves, they developed stamina to outlast them. When threatened by creatures with natural weapons, they created artificial ones. When limited by darkness, they mastered fire. The screen showed historical images of human development, from simple stone tools to modern technology. But the most concerning aspect, continued Zorloth, is their attitude toward cosmic threats. Where we see the universe as a place to hide, from humans see it as a frontier to conquer. The screen changed to show human space exploration, from early rockets to modern space stations. The council members watched footage of astronauts floating in space, seemingly unconcerned by the deadly vacuum just beyond their thin suits. They actively seek out dangerous environments, added Zivra, her voice carrying notes of disbelief. They climb mountains with minimal equipment, dive into ocean depths, and jump from heights with only fabric to slow their fall. The screen displayed humans rock climbing, deep-sea diving, and skydiving. The footage was met with gasps from the assembly. An elder council member from the track species raised a limb to speak. Ambassador, are you suggesting these humans pose a threat? To the council? Zorloth considered the question carefully. Not a direct threat, Elder Jaztur. Humans are cooperative by nature, but they approach problems differently than we do. Where council species typically avoid conflict, humans have evolved to face it head-on. Another council member spoke up. Can they be trusted? A species that evolved to overcome predators might see others as prey. Our observations suggest otherwise, Zivra answered. Humans are highly social and form strong bonds even with non-humans. Their domestication of predator species shows they prefer cooperation over domination when possible. She displayed footage of humans caring for animals, working in teams, and the diplomatic meetings between humans and the alien delegation. However, added Zorloth, they are fiercely protective of their group. Throughout human history, the greatest threats to humans were often other humans. They evolved strong in-group loyalty and can react strongly to perceived threats to their community. The council chamber grew quiet as the members processed this information. A small being from the Neri species spoke next. What benefits would an alliance with these humans bring to the council? Zorloth nodded to Tulvan, who stepped forward with data charts. Humans excel at innovation under pressure. They developed technologies in centuries that took other species millennia. Their problem-solving approaches are different from council standard methods. Tulvan displayed human achievements in medicine, computing, and engineering. They think differently because they evolved differently. This diversity of thought could be valuable. Ambassador Zorloth took center stage again. There is another factor to consider. Humans have fought predators for their entire existence. They understand predatory behavior in ways we cannot. This knowledge could be crucial in regions where the Council faces aggressive species. The screen showed maps of Council space, highlighting border regions where conflicts with non-Council species were common. In these areas, continued Zorloth, human expertise in predator psychology and defense strategies could protect peaceful Council worlds. Elder Jaztur spoke again. You speak of them as if they are warriors, Ambassador. The Council has always valued peace above all. Humans value peace as well, Zorloth replied, but they prepare for threats rather than hoping they will never come. In their long history of facing dangers, they learned that preparation increases survival. The council members talked among themselves. The concept was new and disturbing to many. Species that evolved without significant threats rarely developed defensive capabilities. After much discussion, the head of the council, Grand Arbiter Valshan, called for silence. We have heard much about these humans today. Their evolution on a death world has made them unlike council species in many ways, but difference is not inherently threatening. Valshan's many eyes blinked thoughtfully. We must consider how humans might fit into the greater galactic community. Ambassador Zorlath, what is your recommendation? Zorlath had spent months considering this question. I recommend that humans be classified as a guardian species, potentially valuable allies, but requiring careful, diplomatic handling. The term was new and it caused another wave of murmurs through the chamber. A guardian species? Asked Valshan. Please explain this classification. Humans evolved to face threats directly, Zorlath said. This makes them well suited to protect others who did not. They could serve as defenders of council interests in dangerous regions, while council species provide them with the stability and community they value. Valshan considered this. A symbiotic relationship, then. They offer protection, we offer peace. Exactly, agreed Zorlath. Their history shows they thrive when given something to protect, a purpose that uses their unique abilities. The council voted and the decision was nearly unanimous. Humans would be invited to join the Galactic Council as a guardian species, with special responsibilities and privileges. As the session ended, Zivra approached Zorlath. Do you think they will accept this role? Zorlath watched as the council members filed out of the chamber. Based on my understanding of human psychology, yes. They evolved to overcome challenges and protect their group. Now their group will simply be larger, encompassing many species across the stars. I hope you are right, said Zivra, because I suspect we will need their unique abilities sooner than the council realizes. The emergency alarm blared through the council space station. 1 year had passed since Earth joined the Galactic Council, and now the worst fears of many council members were becoming reality. A previously unknown species called the Vex had begun attacking outlying council worlds, and conventional defenses were failing. Commander Nicole Baker strode down the corridor of the station, her boots clicking against the polished floor. 6 other human military advisors followed her. They had been summoned urgently from Earth after the 3rd colony fell to the Vex. The doors to the emergency command center slid open. Inside, representatives from a dozen council species worked. At various stations, their movements frantic. Grand Arbiter Valshan stood at the center, all 4 of his arms manipulating holographic displays. Commander Baker, Valshan said when he spotted the humans. Thank you for responding so quickly. Nicole nodded. We came as soon as we received your message. What's the situation? Valshan gestured to the main display, which showed a star map with several systems highlighted in red. The Vex have attacked 7 worlds in the past 30 days. 3 colonies have been completely overrun. Any pattern to the attacks? Asked Nicole, studying the map. They strike without warning, said Ambassador Zorlath, who stood nearby. They appear at the edge of a system, jam communications, and launch ground forces. By the time a distress signal reaches us, it's often too late. Nicole turned to her team. Let's see what we're dealing with. Any footage of these Vex? Valshan nodded and changed the display to show security recordings from one of the attacked colonies. The footage showed tall, muscular creatures moving with startling speed through settlement streets. They had sleek bodies covered in dark scales or armor, 4 limbs with sharp claws, and elongated heads with rows of teeth. The humans watched closely as the Vex coordinated their movements, flanking colonists who tried to flee and cutting off escape routes. Have you tried diplomatic contact? Asked Steve Jensen, one of Nicole's advisors. 3 times, replied Valshan. They ignored all attempts at communication. They seem interested only in hunting and territorial expansion. Nicole's eyes narrowed as she studied the Vex movements. They're using hunting patterns, she said after a moment. Look at how they move. They're behaving like ambush predators, similar to Earth's large cats. She pointed to specific moments in the footage. See how they hide, stalk, and pounce? How they cut off escape routes? These are classic predatory tactics. The council members looked at each other in confusion. This type of analysis was foreign to them. "You recognize these behaviors?" asked Zorlath. "Of course," said Nicole. "Humans have been studying predator behavior for thousands of years, first to survive them, then to hunt them, and eventually to protect them. These Vex are using hunting strategies similar to jaguars or tigers." She turned to her team. "If the Vex behave like ambush predators, then they'll have predictable patterns and weaknesses." For the next several hours, Nicole and her team analyzed all available data on the Vex. They studied attack patterns, movement speeds, and response to different defense strategies. The council members watched in amazement as the humans applied their knowledge of Earth predators to an alien threat. "We're ready to present our findings," Nicole announced finally. The command center grew quiet as she took center stage. "The Vex are apex predators," she began. "They hunt in packs, prefer ambush tactics, and focus on isolating targets. Their biology and technology may be different from Earth predators, but their hunting behavior follows similar rules." She displayed a tactical map. "Based on this behavior, we can predict where they'll strike next and how to counter them." Nicole outlined a detailed defense strategy, drawing on humanity's long history of dealing with predators. Predators look for easy targets. They avoid prey that fights back effectively or presents too much risk. Our strategy will be to make every target too costly for them to attack. Major Henry Collins, another of Nicole's team, stepped forward. "We'll use decoys to draw them into prepared areas, then spring traps. Just as humans learned to hunt the hunters on Earth, we'll turn their predatory instincts against them." The plan was complex, but built on simple principles that humans had used against predators for millennia. The council approved it with some hesitation. Actively engaging a threat rather than focusing on evacuation and defense was not their usual approach. 2 weeks later, the human strategy was put to the test. When Vex ships appeared near Colony Epsilon, rather than fleeing or mounting a conventional defense, the colony followed the human plan. They created the appearance of a partially evacuated settlement with strategic weaknesses that would attract the predatory Vex. Commander Nicole and Major Collins led a small human contingent on the ground. They deliberately allowed themselves to be cornered by Vex forces, only to spring an elaborate trap when the aliens closed in for the kill. From the Council space station, Zorlath and other representatives watched the battle unfold. They were stunned when the Vex forces retreated after losing nearly half their numbers. It was the first decisive victory against the new threat. "I don't understand," said one council member as they reviewed the battle footage. "The humans were outnumbered and outgunned. How did they defeat these predators?" "By thinking like predators themselves," explained Zorlath. "Humans evolved alongside dangerous creatures. They learned how predators think, how they hunt, and most importantly, what makes them give up the hunt. In the following months, more human military advisors were dispatched to threatened regions. They trained Council defense forces in anti-predator tactics and psychological warfare, designed specifically for the Vex mentality. 6 months after the battle at Colony Epsilon, the Vex attacks had decreased by 70%. They began avoiding areas with human defenders entirely. On the observation deck of the Council flagship, Ambassador Zorlath found Major Collins staring out at the stars. Below them, Earth was a blue jewel against the blackness of space. "The Council has never seen anything like what your people have accomplished," said Zorlath. "You turned the tide against an enemy that had us retreating on all fronts." Collins shrugged. "We just applied what we've always known. Predators follow patterns. Once you understand those patterns, you can counter them." "But how did your species gain this knowledge?" asked Zorlath. "Most Council species evolved to hide from predators, not study them." "Necessity," Collins replied. "When early humans couldn't outrun or overpower predators, we had to outsmart them. We learned their behaviors, their weaknesses. We turned disadvantages into advantages." Zorlath was quiet for a moment, then said, "Your world forged you through fire and teeth. Our worlds sheltered us from such trials. Perhaps both paths have value." "Different strengths for different challenges," Collins agreed. "That's what makes a good team." As they looked down at Earth, Sorlath understood something profound about humanity. Their planet had not merely allowed them to survive, it had prepared them for the stars. The very harshness that should have destroyed them had instead created a species uniquely equipped to face the dangers of the universe. The Deathworlders had not only defeated their predators, they had learned from them. And now, that ancient knowledge was protecting life throughout the galaxy,